episode of Gar Borras' Time Machine. Gar, can you believe this is episode 24? And today, just to let people know, we are going to be talking all about the history of The Price is Right. So I want to get right into it, Gar, and tell me, are you much of a fan of The Price is Right, or even TV game shows in general?
I wouldn't say that, watching game shows was a
thrill of a lifetime. Yeah,
it wasn't but there were, quite a few times, back in the 80s, as a musician,
yeah.
Your lifestyle is very different from the
9 to 5.
Right, the 9 to 5 grind. You get to play music, and sometimes you're up late at night and
sleep
you
all
wake
day.
up the next day.
Yeah.
And part of that ritual was putting on The Price is Right, and basically kind of being a couch potato, before you actually wind up getting up for the day. And, I remember, many times, turning on the TV and just, kind of gelling, watching Price is Right. And, I really enjoyed it, I think the biggest thing that got me was... I would always watch the show, and I would try to guess the price, just like anybody else. I'm sure that's what everybody else at home was doing too, trying to guess the price. And I was always wrong. and always wrong by a lot. And I came to a realization is of course, when you go shopping, during that time period, you're always looking for the best price. And when you're looking at prices in the paper, and you're looking, say you're looking at furniture, or you're looking at this, or you're looking at that, you're always looking at the quote sale price. And The Price is Right was based on retail prices. And, of course, nobody is paying attention to retail prices, because whenever you're shopping, you're not looking for the retail price. You're looking for the sale price. And so everybody's familiar with the sale price. So when you're at home and you're trying to guess, of course, you're way off, because you're not thinking in retail prices. You're not thinking in that scope. So I was always way off.
I think too, a big part of that, it depends on your age. I'll tell you what I mean. I'm much better at guessing the price now, and as far as retail prices. I'll give you an example. When I remember back in the day when I was a little kid watching this show, The Price is Right, and so of course my mom and dad back then were doing all the shopping for the house, and I tag along, but I wasn't really paying attention to the prices, if you know what I mean. The older you get, and you're actually having to pay for the stuff, then you're you pay a little more attention to it. But it's funny that how much of an impact The Price is Right has had on my life, so much to the point that when I go to the grocery store these days, Gar, one of the things I do, or really any retail store, I'm always telling myself, okay, I'm going to see if I can Price is Right it, I get an idea in my head of what the bill's going to cost. I try to figure it out. And I say, okay, I'm going to say maybe it's going to be between $30, $40. And I'm somewhere usually right in the middle.
Well, I have no idea why it took me so long to come to that realization.
Yeah.
I was just watching the show and doing what anybody would do, which is, trying to, you're basically at home participating in the game.
Yeah.
It really took me a long time to come to that realization, and I kind kind of kick myself. I really feel that I should have come to that realization way earlier.
Oh. Well, yeah.
But anyways, it's what made the show fun to watch. Participating at home, and I really loved how they really changed up the games. So whenever you're watching it, it never got boring. Watching the same. Games that the contestants would participate in, and it never got mundane.
I think
they had a lot of different games to choose from, so it always stayed fresh.
And I think part of a reason for that too is where they get the contestants. The contestants are always picked out of a studio audience. So I mean, I think I shared this with you before, that back in the day I went and seen a couple sitcoms and Dr. Phil episodes taped. You go down to the studio, you have to hope you get a ticket, and then stand in line all day and hope you get in. And so it's a fun thing to just go down and see one of these things like The Price is Right, taped live. But then you get in, and not only do you get to see it taped live, but you get picked to be an actual contestant on the show. And that's a big part of it, because I mean, whereas opposed to a show like Jeopardy, where a lot of the people are very intelligent and they study books and they know a lot of stuff, and they just study a whole lot before they even go on. These people are just kind of picked on the spot, and so they have to kind of really be on their game and kind of just be in the moment,
Well, that's true, and with the guy that they had, because when I was doing the research for this episode, there's like one guy that would interview all potential contestants.
Yeah.
And I forgot the number, but it was like 150,000 people a year he interviews to come up with the small handful of contestants that would actually be picked out of the audience.
Wow.
So I mean, that guy had to be he really had to have a knack. Because I mean, he was like the guy, for many years, in the history of the show, and it was kind of mind-boggling to think of how many people he interviews to come up with, and I was also, checking out that they were looking for, I guess maybe about 3 simple characteristics.
Yeah.
And the number one characteristic over the other 2 was energy. Energetic.
Yeah.
They were always, that was like the number one most important component they were looking for in potential contestants. And it was kind of interesting that there was one thing that I came to a realization when I used to watch this back in the 80s. You were pretty much guaranteed you were going to get picked if you were in the military and you were wearing your military uniform.
Wow, yeah.
You were guaranteed that you were going to be picked, because that was one of the most important things that they were looking for over and beyond the 3 characteristics that I was talking about a little earlier.
Yeah, and Gar, I think you and me will have this in common as far as The Price is Right. I mean, in my lifetime, when I think of The Price is Right, probably Bob Barker is the host I think of, because he was the guy hosting the show all those years. And like a lot of the stuff that we've, these episodes we've done in the past, and you do the research, come to find out, I don't know if when you were doing the research, I was kind of kicked all over the place. Like, there's a Wikipedia page for The Price is Right, then there's one for the new Price is Right. And part of the reason for that is because the Price is Right, it goes all the way back to the 1950s. Now, The Price is Right is a TV game show that first aired in 1956, and the show was originally hosted by Bill Cullen, whose broadcasting career began, get this, in 1939 as a radio disc jockey in Pittsburgh, and as a play-by-play announcer on the radio for both the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Pittsburgh Hornets. Now, I bring this all up because I know nothing about this guy, Bill Cullen, but he was the original host, so he deserves to be mentioned. And then I'm kind of thinking, okay, who was this guy? Where did they get him from? And so this is the first time he was ever like on TV once The Price is Right first aired in 1956, but before that, he was on the radio, so people are hearing him on the radio. He was a play-by-play announcer, so they think, okay, this guy's got a little bit of broadcasting experience, but let's try him on TV. And so, like I said, the show went from 1956 to 1965, and then they would relaunch it again with Bob Barker in 1972, and for a while they were referring to it as the new Price is Right, but it just became so popular that they decided we're going to drop the new and we're just going to go with The Price is Right.
Well, when I was doing the research too, I was checking it out, and the original version that came out back in the 1950s was very different from what it originally became.
Yeah.
When Bob Barker took over, it was kind of much more like a panel, because the 1950s, it was the very beginning of all of game shows. And, and it was kind of like a panel kind of a thing setting on the show, and very, very old school.
Yeah.
The set would kind of remind me of You Bet Your Life. Remember that Groucho Marx show?
Oh yeah.
Where he would interview people, and it was the classic desk, that Johnny Carson and all the other shows that went on to follow, and become iconic. But Groucho Marx kind of started that whole thing, that whole desk setting with the star interviewer sitting behind the desk, and then the guest sitting in the seat. Kind of like an office setting kind of thing.
Yeah, like you said, in
so it was there's a stark difference between the first generation and what it eventually became. But it was very classic for the time.
Yeah, and you got to remember, Gar. I mean, we had an episode, for example, we did on the original Universal film of Dracula and Frankenstein, and those movies came out. The movies I'm talking about came out in 1931. And they were one of the first talking movies ever, and so you got to remember, by the time The Price is Right first airs on TV in 1956, TV had only been a thing for a few years, and so much to the point, like you're saying, that if you go back and look at any of those pictures that you could probably find online of The Price is Right from back in the day, the sets looked pretty different. They were very much more amateur, because again, TV was just kind of in its infancy, so much that when you and I think of The Price is Right, and a lot of people, they'd probably be amazed to find out that back in 1956, black and white. It was black and white. It wouldn't get colorized until it was relaunched in 1972, because by that point, TV has been around for quite a number of years, and it's quite different.
Yeah, and then when they finally, came out in 72 with the retooled version of the show, Bob Barker, he just, kind of set the standard for all other TV hosts to follow.
And, yeah.
You know what I mean? He really, if you notice, that all other shows, game shows, that kind of came after, they all had their similarities to Bob Barker.
Yeah, and that's why I picked The Price is Right, because at that time in 1956, when The Price is Right first aired, I mean, there were a few other game shows, but not like there were in the 80s or even today. And so it was one of the premier game shows. And like you said, it kind of set the standard for what game shows would become. And it's not only one of the longest running TV game shows, one of the longest running TV shows, period, in the United States television history. So I thought, this is one show that, if we're going to talk about game shows, really deserves to have, tip our hat to, because they have been around for so long. And just a little more background on who Bill Cullen was, the original host. And this is kind of predating what he did prior to The Price is Right. In 1944, Bill Cullen arrived in New York and was hired as an announcer for CBS. And also, in 1944, as a means to make extra money, Bill Cullen became a joke writer for top radio talent of the day, such as Arthur Godfrey, Danny Kaye, and Jack Benny. And I wrote that down because I thought, okay, so, once it comes time for The Price is Right in 1956, people have heard this guy on the radio. They might know some people might know who he is. They say, okay, well, if he can write jokes for, somebody like Jack Benny and Arthur Godfrey, okay, maybe he's a funny guy. I mean, he's obviously got that experience. And so that would work good on TV. That's one of the things you need to be a TV game show host,
Well, to draw the audience in, there has to be a reason for the audience to be drawn in, and back in the 1950s, he had it, just like Bob Barker had it, when they chose him, to MC, Price is Right.
Yeah.
The new version, or the iconic version.
And I think the other thing we should mention about The Price is Right, you mentioned about it being a daytime game show, and it is. But one of the things that always set The Price is Right apart from other game shows, it was such a popular show that even like from 1956 to 1965, they had a daytime version and they had a primetime version, and the same guy hosted the show. And again, eventually what happened is, like with a lot of things, come 1965, the landscape is different. Things are changing. The ratings start to go down. So by 1965, because the ratings had gone so low, they canceled The Price is Right. And then, like we said, they relaunched it in 1972.
Well, but you also, you can't mention the show without talking about Barker's Beauties.
Yeah. So I'll let you do that. So because that was a big part of the show.
Oh man, that was just another part of the show's ability to draw in the audience. Those three girls.
Eye candy,
that were the original ones from the version when Bob Barker took over.
Yeah.
They were all, gorgeous. And, I remember I knew about Janice Pennington.
Oh, yeah, I remember her.
Before she was ever on the show, because she posed for Playboy. And
wow. Yeah.
Of course, that was the time in my life where, I think everybody,
I'm with you, Gar. So much to the point
was,
that
looking at at Playboy, checking it out and everything, and she was one of the top Playboy models, for Playboy during that time before she became involved in the Price is Right.
And back in the day, Playboy was even one of those things where back then I don't think you or I ever could imagine that there'd be a day where Playboy was no more, but Playboy is now a thing of the past. But back in the day, a lot of wannabe actresses and models, that's how they would get their start. That's how they would get national exposure. And of course, the main goal for these girls back in the day were to get on the cover or the centerfold of Playboy. So that's how a lot of people like Janice Dickinson got discovered.
Well, there was, I think most of the people that were watching The Price is Right were, housewives and, people that are basically staying at home because in the 1980s, the classic American family where the husband works and the wife stays at home was still in full effect.
Yeah.
It didn't start deteriorating till later on, in the late 80s and the early 90s, and then that whole dynamic of the American family was kind of going deteriorating, really. And but in the 80s it was still that classic mom stays home and raises the kids and dad works was still in full effect. So the big bulk of the audience during the daytime when they were showing the show was housewives, but because they had Barker's Beauties, that really increased their audience, because any guys that were at home, during that time too, were zeroing in on the show, because they enjoyed the show and the cool games. But how guys are, and that I'm sure that really had a big boost in the show's ratings.
Well, yeah, and Gar, like you're saying, back in the 1950s when the show first was airing on TV, TV was in its infancy. So imagine if you're alive back in the 50s and everything you're watching is black and white. And then I bring this up because in 1957, The Price is Right became the very first TV game show to be broadcast in color. I mean, again, you and I have watched.
That's an interesting,
Yeah, and again, I bring this up because you and I have watched old episodes of stuff like the Andy Griffith and I Love Lucy, that was shot in black and white. But imagine if you're around back in the 50s, and all of a sudden, The Price is Right starts being aired in color. It's like, wow, what is this? And then,
well, that was my time period, because when I was a little kid, in the early 60s, because by then, it wasn't until I was maybe about kindergarten, first grade, that I started really having memories that I still remember today. But I remember, as a young kid, everything that was on TV was black and white, and color TVs didn't exist. And the bulk of the households in America all had black and white TVs, and it was part of my childhood that the color TVs started. It first started in the movies. They started transitioning to color in the movies, but eventually transformed in TV also. So I remember, how rare it was if you went to somebody's home and they had a color TV. Even though they had a color TV, most of the stuff that was still being shown on their TV was in black and white. So it was kind of trippy, but it was very, very interesting to be around and alive during the time, during that transition, because I remember the transition from black and white to color, and then I also now remember how when color took over, it's like people, unless you're people like you and I, you would never even be aware that TV was ever in black and white.
Oh yeah, and even the marketing for the show. I mean, if you go back, to when the show originally aired in 1956, it had a pretty simple logo. The Price is Right. I was looking at some images that you can find online, and now since they relaunched the show in 1972, the logo they currently still have. I mean, what a huge difference. I mean, when you see that logo again, it's one of those things like the Golden Arches. You know what it is. There's no.
Oh, absolutely. The logo alone is iconic.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's interesting because it's one of those shows that really never got unpopular. I mean, the ratings initially of the original show went down, and that's why it was taken off the air. But from the time they relaunched it in 1972, it has not been canceled. It's still on the air. They're still doing new episodes. And that's the thing. It's one of the longest-running TV shows. And so here's an interesting thing. The Price is Right was initially a top 10 primetime TV game show. But then in 1963, as I said, the ratings began to slip. And by the end of 1963, NBC had canceled The Price is Right. From 1963 to 1964, The Price is Right ran on ABC. The primetime version of the Price is Right. So at that point, they only had a primetime version. The daytime version of the show ended in 1965. And then again, The Price is Right was relaunched in 1972. The first episode premiered on CBS on September 4th, 1972, with new host Bob Barker.
Yeah. Up until then, the top game show host was Monty Hall.
Wow.
From Let's Make a Deal.
Yeah.
But then when Bob Barker, took off with Price is Right, they just completely, it was almost like it signified the end of Let's Make a Deal.
Oh, yeah,
You know what I mean? Because it's almost like, that was like, the popularity of that show really kind of, they lost a big audience share to The Price is Right. That's a guess on my part.
Yeah.
But it just seems, that, when you look at the chronological timeline and everything like that, I think it kind of supports it. Just looking at that timeline.
And what did you think of Bob Barker as a host? I mean, because his time was, his reign was a 35-year run. So I mean, to me, he always had he reminded me kind of like a Bob Newhart, kind of had a dry humor, but he was very funny. People loved him.
I think another thing that I really enjoyed about watching the show was the contestants getting crazy around Bob.
Yeah.
Because, that was always a wild card part of the show because, that's something, see, what I learned from, being on TV is that TV never leaves anything for chance. They won't even, for a long time, TV wouldn't even allow musical performers to perform live on TV.
Yeah.
You would always have to lip sync or basically pretend that you were, performing to the music. But, they just never leave anything for chance. And that's always been a rule for TV for a really, really long time. I guess it even goes back to, the 50s and 60s where they learned that they had to do that. Yeah. But, when you watched The Price is Right, you can't control the energy of a
contestant,
contestant that's just found out that they get to come on down, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so much.
Or when they win something like a new car, and they're going absolutely bonkers, and it was always something that an element to the show that I think really was a hook part of the show.
I mean, there was that element of the show where, you're cheering on a lot of these contestants because a lot of them, they go on the show and they win all this money, they win all these prizes, and you're kind of like have that dream that, man, I wish it could be me up there, And then somebody that's winning a car, and they, not only do they win the car, but they, many of those contestants get up there and they just break down and cry. Oh my God, I need a new car. I never thought I'd be able to get a new car. Oh, thank you. It's going to change my life forever. And you couldn't help but root for people like that,
Well, yeah. The thing that I think everybody didn't really realize is when you win that new car, you got to pay the taxes on it.
Yeah, I mean, and even, people really, like, I can say for myself, I did not become aware of stuff like that probably until, like the 90s and stuff, and, stuff like that starts coming out. I mean, but it was a well-kept secret. Like, I remember hearing that Oprah Winfrey had an episode where all these people she gave a whole audience all these cards, but then they find out they had to pay all these taxes.
Oh, man, but, it was was also fun, there was a couple of other things that were really, big parts of the show. The wheel, the giant wheel.
I mean, just a wheel. But just
One
a
of
wheel.
the reasons why I really enjoyed watching it was something that most people don't really realize. Pulling that wheel and getting it to go, in order to qualify for a spin, it has to go all the way around. And that wheel was heavy, and you would watch some people, and they would literally have to put all of their might into trying to get that wheel to go around, and sometimes they would do it as hard as they could, and it wasn't enough to get it to go all the way around.
Yeah, and the wheel. The thing
so what my point is when people would pull on that wheel with all your might, it was kind of dangerous.
Wow. And,
because you could actually put everything you have into it and spin it and actually fall into the wheel. So there was an element of danger, that people could actually get hurt trying to spin that wheel. And I was always watching because there was so many close calls.
And another thing about The Price is Right or game shows, period, is I think part of the reason people love game shows so much is who does not love playing games? I mean, you sit down with your friends, you play board games and this and that. You play computer games. And the thing about something like The Price is Right, I mean, even if you look at the set looks flashy. It kind of looks like kind of Las Vegas-y, all the bright colors. And part of the reason for that, of course, is it's on TV, but you want to grab people's attention. They can't help but look at what's going on the stage. And the thing with the wheel, you make a very good point, because I remember watching that Price is Right, and as a person spinning the wheel, I'm kind of thinking, oh, okay, watching it go around. Oh, come on, hit this number. And then sometimes it would, and sometimes it wouldn't, and it didn't hit nothing. It'd be like, oh, boo! Yeah.
You're always rooting for the person, and of course, you're so happy for them if they win the top prize on the spin. Because you can win on the spin. Yeah. But the true purpose of the spin is to determine who is going to do the final thing when they have the whole stage with all of those prizes, and then you have to guess what the value of all of that stuff together is. And one of those interesting things about that final
showcase,
guessing thing that they would have to do at the end of the show. There was, in the history of the show, there was only one person that ever got the price of all of that stuff right on the head of the nail, and they stopped the show for like 45 minutes, checking on it to make absolutely sure that the guy didn't cheat. Because nobody had ever gotten the price exactly right.
And see, that's the thing with a show like The Price is Right. That's why people would always tune in, not just because of the actual game and you're cheering people on and you're rooting for something, but because like with something like The Price is Right, I mean, you look at statistics like that, and I mean, like pretty much no two episodes of Price is Right are ever, the same. And there's has a lot to do with just people they pick as the contestants, the people's personality, their knowledge of things. I mean, you could get somebody that's really, really great at pricing things, and then you get somebody that's not as great, and whatever you get, kind of it makes for the show, if you know what I mean.
Well, there's another interesting thing, out of all of the 35 years of the Bob Barker version of the show, the most talked about episode, there is a particular one episode that is the most talked about one is where there was a girl that was picked from the audience, and she was jumping up and down so excited that she got called up. She was wearing a tube top.
Wow.
And she had a wardrobe malfunction.
Wow.
And Bob Barker was saying that was the first time he had ever been welcomed like that.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think on your feet. And when we think of game show hosts, I mean, probably two from our lifetime that kind of are most memorable to me. Bob Barker, for obvious reasons we've been talking about. But you had like Richard Dawson on the Family Feud, the original host of that. I mean, and Richard Dawson became famous for that how he'd go up to all the female contestants and kiss them, and he'd do that thing.
Yes, that became a tradition on that show.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of his trademark. And so eventually you get enough game shows on TV where they're competing with one another. That's why something like the Family Feud or The Price is Right. That's why those shows kind of stood out, because they weren't trying to copy all the other game shows. They kind of, as you say, set the standard for what would come after. Yes, because I mean,
when you look at like a lot of these other game shows, they seem so simplified compared to The Price is Right.
Yeah.
Because The Price is Right changes up so many different things, and all of those change ups in all of these different facets always kept the show very fresh and very exciting. I think that's the key element. There was an element of excitement in the show that it really, I think all of these other game shows that follow, are always trying to achieve. There's the standard set by Price is Right, and everybody else is trying. Let's see how close we can get to that as we can with our show.
I mean, that's why something as great as what the Gong Show once was, even something like that, as popular as it once was, I think eventually had its run.
You really brought up a good point right there, because the Gong Show had that same element of excitement.
Yeah, but even like the Gong Show, as great as that was, eventually ran its course, if you know what I mean. I mean, they never really brought that back, and maybe there's a reason for that. But like The Price is Right, there's always that kind of element of surprise. I mean, they're still making new episodes, and I think it's one of those things, fortunately, for the people behind The Price is Right, that the audience never kind of tires of.
Well, whenever you mention the Gong Show, I just have to. My favorite guy, contestant on there was the Unknown Comic.
Wow! Yeah.
That guy was funny.
Yeah. And it's funny. We have these conversations every 2 weeks, Gar, and things like the Gong Show, which I think I'm gonna have to do an episode on, comes up. And it's not something I constantly am thinking of, but it was a good thing to bring up, I think. And now The Price is Right. Getting back to Bob Barker. Bob Barker was the host, as I said, The Price is Right from 1972 to 2007, which makes The Price is Right the longest-running daytime game show in North American TV history, which is kind of, again, what an accomplishment.
Well, yeah, and it's still going. It's crazy. It's literally crazy. I really enjoyed watching it back in the 80s. When I basically was, living a much more simplified life. Yeah. But it was just, it was part of that normal daily thing, just basically turn that on, when you're, doing your activities at that time. It was just something that I really enjoyed watching, and I can't really explain, why. It was just a natural thing, I guess I'm flipping around the channels at the same time, and nothing else, seemed as interesting to watch, and it just became a daily thing.
I mean, it becomes part of your life. It becomes like like when I think of The Price is Right, I remember turning it on and seeing that wheel go around and seeing the flashy Las Vegas-y set. I could not just, it grabbed my attention. I could not help but tune into it. We've talked in the past about like my Tuesday night back in the 70s and 80s was Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Three's Company. Those were my shows. Didn't matter what I was doing. And then, eventually in the 80s, you get to a point where they start selling VCRs. Okay, well, if I'm not going to be home, I'm going to tape my shows. I'm going to come home later. I'm still going to tune into those shows,
Well, and it's kind of funny because in doing the research for this, you find out things that you never knew. Yeah. And Vanna White was actually a contestant on The Price is Right a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years before she became one of the letter turner on Wheel of Fortune.
Wow.
So it's kind of trippy. She was actually a contestant, and Bob Barker, when she was on there, she didn't make it out of that first row, trying to trying to get out of that row and actually participate in the game. She never really made it out of that row. Yeah. But Bob Barker made a comment to her about how she was always looking at herself in the monitor.
Yeah, wow, that's funny.
So it's kind of trippy. Maybe she was kind of scoping this out and deciding maybe that she wanted to pursue this. Who knows?
Yeah,
maybe it sparked something in her in pursuing that.
Yeah, funny you bring that up because I think this has come up in past another kind of TV game show that kind of launched a lot of famous people's careers, not even knowing it back in the day, was the dating game. I've come across clips of like Suzanne Summers, Tom Selleck, John Ritter before anybody knew who these people were. They made appearances on the dating game, and then years later, of course, when they become famous, oh yeah, we featured so and so, before anybody knew who they were. And that's just kind of interesting how people kind of take part in other things before they're really famous, and then years later, oh yeah, I did that and I did that.
Well, in like looking into this and everything, just basically, what I do when I'm researching is I kind of when I'm doing the research, I'm actually looking for things that trigger memories.
That
and one of those memories is when I was really young, I knew about the scandal.
From the 1930s,
about game shows back in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And I knew about it, but I really didn't know that much about it and everything. I just knew that it was a big deal and it was a huge scandal that really kind of affected game shows that basically created a law making it illegal to
like cheat on the game shows.
Yeah. Cheat on a game show, whether it's the contestant that's cheating or the actual game show that's cheating.
Yeah.
And there was a show back in the 1950s called 21, and that was the game show that got caught, where not only was the contestant involved in the cheating, but the actual game show itself was involved in the cheating, which created this huge uproar about it, because back in that time, integrity was a much bigger deal than it is now. But it actually created, to where they actually passed a law to make it against the law to cheat. But which brings an interesting point, because in the entire history of The Price is Right, there was never, ever a scandal about cheating.
And I think it had a lot to do with, the scandal you're talking about. I came across that information too, and they actually made a movie about that. You can look it up, called Quiz Show. I forget what year it came out, but it was kind of about the game show scandal. And
I remember that.
And I also remember they did an episode of Happy Days, kind of loosely based on that scandal from back in the 50s, where, in Happy Days episode, Richie's going to appear on a game show, and then the producers backstage of the show kind of want to give him the answers and cheat. And he's got his dilemma, of course, for a 30-minute episode is, do I go on the show and cheat? And I know they've given me all my answers, or do I purposely throw the game because I got integrity and I don't want to? And we of course know what our hero Richie did, but that so again, that's such an impact on just the general public, pop culture, whatever you want to call it, that they made a movie about. They had a Happy Days episode about it, and the thing you got to realize, Gar, is who would ever think you'd have to make a law about the game shows on TV can't cheat? But then think about when the scandal first broke. Could you imagine being around back in the day and you find out, oh my God, they cheat on that show that I watch? They give the people the answers, and I've read stuff where they would have somebody go on the show because they had the right look, and maybe the person wasn't the most intelligent, but okay, you got the right look we want you to appear on our show. We'll give you the answers. Don't worry, you're going to win. But could you imagine watching a show and then you find out, how let down you'd be, like, oh my God, cheaters, wow, I'm not watching that.
Well, that's the whole thing, because back in the 1950s, integrity was a huge thing.
Yeah.
And once the cat was out of the bag that the show 21 was cheating, that was the end of the show.
Oh yeah.
That show never recovered from that.
Never reappeared.
It was just that way. It was completely shut down and never to come back again.
And I think people saw after that controversy occurred, okay, do you want to be like that show, or obviously not. So it never really reappeared that in any kind of scandal like that. Now I was kind of interested to know what Bob Barker did, prior to hosting The Price is Right. And interestingly enough, when the original Price is Right was on TV, Bob Barker was also on TV. Any idea what show he hosted back in the day?
Absolutely not, and you've got my attention.
Okay. It says, prior to becoming the host of The Price is Right in 1972, Bob Barker was the host of another TV game show, Truth and Consequences, which ran from 1956 to 1975.
Oh my gosh, you're 100% right.
So here's the thing. Okay, this thing that interested me about that. So back when The Price is Right was originally on black and white with Bill Cullen hosting the show, the guy who's a radio disc jockey, Bob Barker is hosting Truth and Consequences. And so once, The Price is Right is relaunched, not only is he hosting The Price is Right, but he was also still hosting Truth and Consequences. So that's the thing. That's how they discovered Bob Barker. He was already on TV, which is another interesting thing. By the time Bob Barker announced he was going to retire, not just from The Price is Right, but from show business in 2007, at that point in time, he had already been on TV for 50 years. And we're not just talking The Price is Right.
So he was already a veteran before anybody knew who he was.
And what's amazing about that?
That statement that I just made is completely inaccurate.
Yeah, and what's amazing about it is, he had a much longer run, obviously, with The Price is Right, and that's why even today, as we sit here and we mention Bob Barker, he's remembered not so much for what came before, but for The Price is Right. But there's nothing wrong.
Yeah, who needs an audition?
Yeah.
They knew exactly what they were getting.
Yeah. And then again, it says Bob Barker, after 35 years of hosting The Price is Right, decided to retire and end his reign of hosting The Price is Right. On June 15th, 2007 was his final show. Also marked, like I said, Barker's 50th anniversary as a TV game show host. And then, as we all know, he was replaced by comedian Drew Carey, who's hosted the show ever since. Nothing against Drew Carey. I think he's done a pretty decent job of taken over of a show. But I got to be honest, I don't really tune into the show anymore. And I think part of it is because when nothing against Drew Carey, but when I think of The Price is Right, I think of Bob Barker.
I'm with you. I wound up doing exactly the same thing, and not against Drew Carey, because I have, incidentally, seen some episodes, and they're doing a great job with the show. Yeah. I just kind of, it just kind of signified for a certain age group that, you're moving on to the next thing that kind of grabs your interest because you've spent enough time with, Price is Right. It's time for something new. And it just kind of took its natural course at that time. But I also remember, that it was a big deal when he changed hair color.
Oh, yeah,
because the original, to me, it looked like jet black, but, it was a real dark, super dark brown. And that was iconic because, for most of his career doing the show, that was his look. And to be honest with you, me personally, I preferred the dyed dark black or dark brown. But statistics, show that the statistics are not with me. Yeah. Statistics basically show that the ratings for the show actually got boosted when he went to his natural gray hair color.
I think part of the reason is
so there goes your you can be a person that can have vision and see a lot of things where other people and yet even though you have that you can still see things wrong.
I mean part of the reason I think for that is by the time he starts to go natural and just show his gray white hair. At that point he becomes like a lovable grandfatherly type, and it's funny because all these years later, that's kind of the image I have of Bob Barker, the white hair.
Yes, that the white, white hair in itself became iconic. And it's kind of trippy.
Yeah.
When you're talking about a game show host and the actual color of his hair can be just as popular as him himself.
Oh, yeah. The only thing I can really say that ever marveled that was when Alex Trebek from Jeopardy did the unthinkable and shaved his mustache. Oh, my God. People went crazy.
That's so trippy, but it was a big deal.
Yeah. But it really was. And, I just got to say that another thing was in 1988, he also took over as executive producer of a show. So, he also at that point had a lot of creative control in how the show was going to be, made from that point on. So, but I think Bob Barker, like you said, he just kind of set the standard. And nothing against Drew Carey, but I think for you and me and a lot of people from our different generations. It was the end of an era, not so much into The Price Right, just end of an era. And people tuning in today, they're people that have no idea who Bob Barker is. They just know The Price is Right is hosted by Drew Carey. They don't know what came before, maybe.
It's so trippy. And out of all the plethora of the different games that people would play to try to win, because they had so many different ones, and but the most popular of all of them was that Plinko.
Oh yeah.
Thing, everybody loved it when they played that because, then again, it's a wild card game.
Yeah.
Because it's something that you can't control and you can't predict, and that I when I was watching it, I was just enjoying it and everything. But now in analyzing it and everything, I completely see why it was so popular because it had that element, just like the actual contestants were wild cards, and just because there's these elements to the show, when people would win, they literally would jump and down and get so excited that they won that they would become dangerous.
Yeah.
And it was always kind of like this part of the show that you would be tuning in to watch Bob Barker's reaction to these dangerous contestants.
Yeah.
Because his reaction sometimes would be, I got to get out of it. I got to get some distance between myself and this contestants because I could get hurt.
Yeah, and Gar, here's a couple interesting facts before we wrap it up for today. Now, just think about this. We were talking last time about American Bandstand and how long they were on there and how many episodes they did. Okay, this is kind of right up there with that. The Price is Right has aired over 9,000 episodes to date, making it one of the longest-running network series in United States TV history. Just think about that. And as we speak, they are still making new episodes. So that's the thing to kind of really just, bite on,
Well, the actual saying, come on down, or a new car, those two sayings have a life of their own.
Yeah.
Both of those two sayings get used in conversations and different, but everybody knows what you're getting at when you use it in your conversation.
Yeah, and then, again, talking about the impact this show has had on pop culture, just people's lives in general. The Price is Right at one point got so popular that you're not going to believe this, Gar. They created board games. They've created computer games. They've even got lottery scratch-offs of The Price is Right, where you scratch the numbers and you have to get the 3 matching numbers and you hope you win. And the final thing to kind of just wrap it up today and really kind of talk about not just The Price is Right, but Bob Barker's impact on the show, on TV history. On April 9th, 1998, Studio 33 at CBS, where The Price is Right shoots, was renamed the Bob Barker Studio.
Yes. And who other than icons get buildings named after them? Yeah,
and what's interesting too, again, very much like we did in the last episode on American Bandstand, to kind of find out that the original host, Bill Cullen, although he was maybe a little more experienced than even Bob Barker, that's how he got the original gig on The Price is Right. But Bill Cullen is very much like the original host of American Bandstand, has kind of been forgotten. And that's why it felt kind of...
Yes, nobody even knows. He's a complete shadow.
Bob Barker. And again, that says something to I think, about Bob Barker's influence in general, the impact he's had on the show. Knowing very little about this guy, Bill Cullen, that came before, he deserves to be mentioned because, he was there at the start, but for whatever reason, Bob Barker's the one that kind of had the major impact on people.
Well, part of the reason why, I enjoy doing this, with you, collaborating and doing this is, it gives me the chance to also not just talk about the show, but also bringing in the time period,
historical factors.
Because the time period is also an element, and gives the listeners that hopefully really enjoy listening to this, the opportunity to reminisce. And this last thing that I'd like to talk about was a definite part of this show that a lot of people, unless you were living during this time period, you really wouldn't know about what I'm going to bring up. During the 80s, when The Price is Right
Was in its heyday, yeah.
When you would actually be a contestant on the show, and or if you got picked to be in the audience on the show, of course, it was a standard practice by these studios to have the people sign a non-disclosure agreement that you don't say anything about that episode until after the episode has aired.
Yeah.
But you cannot publicly say anything about what you did or anything about that episode until after it's aired. And so, what my point is it's really trippy because we weren't living in the times that we live in now, where if somebody's going to be on there, you can jump on Facebook and tell all your friends, that you're on this TV show and you're all excited and blah, blah, blah. Well, back in the 80s, people that actually either got picked to be on the show or actually got picked to be contestants on the show would literally call all of their friends. Yeah. Because that's the only way that you would be able to get the word out for your friends to watch this episode and to see you either, watch the episode because you might see me, the audience, or watch the episode, I'm actually, in doing contestant, actually playing in the games.
Oh, yeah.
And so you would literally have to, by today's standards, literally go the slow process of literally calling all of your friends, because that's the only way you could reach out to people to let them know that you were going to be on the show, and let them know to watch.
I mean,
so it's kind of trippy. It's very different from now. But there were a lot of people, and I didn't even know them, but I would find out that they were going to be on the show, and I would actually literally watch the show and see them in the audience.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point about how much things have changed since then. I mean, I remember back in the day, you had to worry about if you're going to call long distance or not. If somebody lived long distance, in another state, oh my God, we can't call them because the phone bill will just be too high.
Well, here's another thing for that time period. If long distance charges were a lot cheaper if you called after these certain hours.
Yeah.
Like evening hours, long distance calls were cheaper because people don't know nowadays because you pay a cell phone bill every month.
Yeah.
But back in the old days, when you had that phone that was mounted on the wall, you were actually charged for every phone call
per minute.
It wasn't like an exorbitant amount, but you were literally charged for every phone call that you made back in those days. And then to make a long distance phone call, it cost even more.
Yeah.
But but then there was another thing from back in those days, that if somebody was at your house and they were cheapo miser, and they're going to make a long distance phone call on your phone.
Yeah.
And that, believe you me, that used to happen.
Oh yeah.
It happened at my house back in the 80s. Somebody that I was in a band with made a long distance call at my house, and we found out about it, and we did the whole Sherlock Holmes and found out who it was.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Gar Borras, as usual, it has been a blast. I mean, each time we do these episodes, I just love it even more. And just to let people know, this episode is going to go up next Saturday that we just did. And then 2 weeks when we get together again, you and me are going to have a lot of fun. We're going to do something a little different. We can talk about music. We're going to be talking about the 50th anniversary of Deep Purple's Machine Head album. One of the greatest all-time rock albums. I love Deep Purple. I know you said you did too, so we're going to get into that. And we have a lot more great plans down the line. So, thanks for doing this, Gar, and I'll be talking to you again if you could just hold on for a minute.
Absolutely.
Chaotic Riffs Magazine.